Everyone thinks Razer is untouchable. They've got the brand recognition, the sponsorships, the ecosystem lock-in, the revenue that just keeps climbing. And on the surface, that looks like a moat. But I spent the last 3 months actually digging into their supply chain, their margins, their product development cycle, and where they're actually vulnerable. And here's the thing, there are 3 specific weaknesses that a competitor with the right strategy could exploit right now. Not to hype some startup, but to show you why the gaming gear market is more open than it looks, and why what's impossible today might not be impossible next year. Let's start with the obvious, Razer dominates mindshare. If you ask someone who doesn't game what gaming peripheral company they know, they'll say Razer. They did that on purpose. They spent years building community, throwing money at esports teams, getting their gear into the hands of streamers, and creating this sense that Razer equals premium gaming. It worked. Razer's market cap is around $5 billion. Their net revenue last year was $1.4 billion. They're everywhere. But here's what most people miss. That dominance is narrower than it looks. Razer is actually 3 separate businesses glued together by branding. There's the peripherals, keyboards, mice, headsets, mousepads. There's the hardware, laptops, phones, streaming equipment. And there's the software ecosystem, Razer Synapse, their configuration platform, their app store. Each one has different margins, different competitive dynamics, and different points of vulnerability. When people say Razer is untouchable, they're usually thinking about the peripherals. And yeah, Razer owns that category in the enthusiast space. But they own it the way Apple owns laptops, through brand strength and acceptable quality, not through insurmountable technical advantage. Their mice aren't dramatically better than SteelSeries or Corsair mice. Their keyboards aren't functionally superior to Logitech's. They just have better shelf space and more Twitch streamers using them. The real moat isn't the products. It's the ecosystem lock-in through Synapse. That's the software that lets you customize your Razer gear, find macros, configure RGB lighting, all in one place. And if you own multiple Razer products, switching costs you time and convenience. That's the actual competitive advantage. But here's the thing, it's also the biggest vulnerability. Let me show you where the crack is. Razer Synapse is a mess. Not catastrophically, but noticeably. The software is bloated. It connects to the internet by default, which a lot of people don't like. It drains your system resources. And it has this classic Razer problem, feature creep. They keep adding stuff to it instead of making it lean and fast. There are entire Reddit communities of Razer users complaining specifically about Synapse. Some people disable it entirely and just use the basic functionality. Meanwhile, competitors like Corsair, SteelSeries, and Logitech have been quietly building lighter, better designed configuration software. Corsair's ICUE is less bloated. SteelSeries' GG app is faster to boot. And these companies are starting to do something Razer hasn't done well, they're making their software actually useful, not just functional. Here's what a smart competitor could do. You don't beat Razer by making a better mouse. You beat Razer by making a mouse with 2-year battery life, 0 software bloat, and a configuration app that opens in under a second. You hit them on the thing people actually complain about every day, which is friction. Razer is optimized for breadth, they want you in the ecosystem. A challenger would optimize for depth, make the experience so frictionless that you don't care about the ecosystem. The second vulnerability is right here, Razer's product release cycle is too fast. This is weird because normally that sounds like a strength. But Razer releases new versions of the same product constantly. New version of the Death Adder every 2 years. New version of the Basilisk every 18 months. HyperX, G Pro, X Focus Pro variants. They're flooding the market. And what that does is it trains customers to wait for the next generation, not to feel like they own the latest thing. A Razer mouse from 2 years ago isn't obsolete, but it feels like it's approaching that status. That's intentional, it drives upgrade cycles. But it also means Razer users have low confidence in their purchases. They're always wondering if they should wait for the next version. A competitor who released one truly exceptional mouse and supported it for 5 years straight would stand out. Make the thing perfect. Don't touch it. Just improve the software behind it every quarter. Razer can't do that because they have quarterly earnings to hit and a supply chain that demands constant production. But a smaller, focused company can. Now, the third thing. And this is the one that matters most: Razer doesn't actually make their own hardware. This is true of almost all gaming peripheral makers, but it's especially important for Razer. They design the products, but the actual manufacturing is outsourced, mostly to contract manufacturers in Asia. They're one of dozens of companies using the same factories, buying from the same suppliers, using the same components. That means if you can secure your own relationships with those exact same suppliers and factories, and you have the capital and know how to do it, you can build a comparable product for less money. Razer's margins on peripherals are actually lower than you'd expect, around 40 to 50% gross margin after manufacturing, logistics, and returns. That sounds high, but a lot of that gets eaten by marketing spend, which is roughly 25 to 30% of their revenue. They have to. Because they can't compete on product alone. A company that bootstraps differently, that builds community instead of buying it, that does word of mouth and content marketing instead of esports sponsorships, could undercut them on price while maintaining better margins. Or, they could match Razer's prices and be way more profitable, then reinvest that profit into making the product actually better. So here's the real playbook. Here's how you'd actually do it. First, you pick one category. Not mice and keyboards and headsets. 1. Let's say gaming mice. You make the single best gaming mouse that exists. Not the one with the most buttons or the fancy sensor. The one that feels right in the hand, lasts forever, and has software that doesn't suck. You sell it for $99. Razer's equivalent is $110. You're cheaper, equal quality, better software. Second, you build community without spending money. You send mice to 3 to 5 genuinely influential streamers, not for sponsorship money, but because you believe in the product. You ask for honest feedback. You iterate based on what you hear. You put the design process on YouTube. People eat that stuff up. You don't need 50 streamers. You need 5 who will organically talk about your product because they actually like it. Third, you actually listen to customers. Razer has millions of users. They move slowly because there are millions of competing priorities. You have thousands of users. You can read every piece of feedback. You can fix bugs in a week. You can build features based on what people actually ask for. You can be fast. Fourth, you expand vertically once you've owned the mouse category. Once you have 50,000 people who are genuinely happy with your mouse, you sell them a keyboard. Same philosophy. Best in class. No compromise. And now you have a 2-product ecosystem. Now your software is actually useful because you have multiple devices to coordinate. You do this for 3 to 5 years before you worry about being a billion-dollar company. You build a product-driven company, not a marketing-driven company. And you let Razer chase earnings while you chase loyalty. But here's the honest part. This hasn't happened yet, and there's a reason why. Building a hardware company is brutally hard. You need capital. You need supply chain expertise. You need to survive 2 years of losses while you figure out manufacturing, quality control, and logistics. You need the stomach for 30% of your first batch arriving with defects. You need to deal with tariffs, shipping delays, component shortages. You need to hire people who've done this before. Most venture capitalists don't want to bet on gaming gear because the margins are lower than software and the timeline is longer. Corsair and SteelSeries, the closest competitors, spent millions of dollars and a decade building what they have. They're not small scrappy startups anymore. They're big companies with their own supply chain problems, their own bloated organizations. They have a shot, but they're not hungry anymore. The real vulnerability for Razer isn't that a competitor will be built. It's that Razer will optimize themselves into irrelevance. That they'll keep releasing iterative updates, keep focusing on streamers and esports, keep making Synapse worse with each version, and eventually a generation of gamers will just not care about the brand anymore. And by the time Razer realizes they should have been building loyalty instead of chasing quarterly growth, it'll be too late. That's actually how most monopolies fall. Not to a direct attack, but to irrelevance. So is it impossible to overtake Razer? No. It's just hard, it takes time, and it requires doing things the opposite way they do things. But for the right team with the right product, there's absolutely an opening. And honestly, I'd love to see it happen. More competition means better products for us. If you're watching this and you're thinking about building something in the gaming space, or if you just want to see when these ideas actually start happening, hit subscribe. We're going to keep tracking this space, and when someone finally cracks this, you're going to want to have seen it coming.